Hello guys, good afternoon. So basically there is a lot of short stories that was created during the post-EDSA literature. So our group was assigned to discuss these different short stories during the post-EDSA literature. So the first story is that was assigned to me is the very last story of Huli by Lilia Quindoso Santiago. So basically this is the first story that is indicated in our OBTL. So by the way, I am Aisin Percy Bolanadi from English 2-1 and let's start. We have here our learning objectives. The first one, we need to define what is a short story. And the second one, we need to furthermore discuss the background of the author, which is Mrs. Lilia Quindoso Santiago. And the very last story of Huli is the third one. We need to discuss more about the characters of the story, the setting, and the most important is the plot of the story, the theme, and the symbolism used, and also the moral of the story. So let's start. So the first one that we have in our learning objective is what defines a short story. So a short story is a brief fictional prose narrative that is shorter than a novel and that usually deals with only a few characters. So basically, a short story is a type of a story or a literature with a fully developed theme but significantly shorter and less elaborate than a novel, which means this kind of short story is a narrative that is shorter than a novel and it can be done the story in just one sitting. So the second one, we need to discuss more about the background of the author. And the author of the piece that I will be discussing later is Ms. Lilia Quindoso Santiago. So, Lilia Quindoso Santiago, born on February 5, 1949. So, Lilia Quindoso Santiago is the daughter of Victorino Quindosa of Santa Cruz of Marinduque and Buena Candanilla of Solano, Nueva Vizcaya, and spouse of a songwriter, Jesus Manuel Santiago. So basically, Lilia Quindoso Santiago was born in Manaoag, Pangasinan. But growing up, she went studying in Baguio City. She writes different pieces, and most of her pieces theme is all about women's issues, related to some indigenous people, basically, most specifically to those Ilocos and other ethnic groups in the Philippines. So she thought Filipino literature and creative writing at the University of the Philippines and earned different awards. And let's now be proceeding to the very last story of Huli by Lilia Quindoso Santiago. So before we proceed to the plot of the short story, I'll be going to discuss first the characters and the setting itself. So let's start. We have here the first character. We have Huli. Basically, she is the protagonist of the short story. She is mute but not deaf, which means she cannot speak but she can hear the different sounds that is surrounded to her. And she lived her life not knowing some of her identities. She was accused of killing a barangay tanod or a barangay police officer. Next, we have Francisca, the mother of Huli. Francisca, mother of Huli but disguised as her aunt. She was also known as the town's tailor. And the third one, we have Tinyong, the antagonist of the short story. He is a barangay police officer. And the setting of the short story happened in a one late afternoon at the town of Dimatanto. So let's now be proceeding to the plot of the short story. The very last story of Huli. So it was all started when Huli survived the sexual exploitation from Padre Camorra. Basically, Padre Camorra was introduced in some piece of our national hero, specifically to his famous piece, the El Filibusterismo. So Padre Camorra was introduced in El Fili that he was a friar with a particular predilection for young women, specifically to Huli. So after jumping out of the dormitory window, she dwelled around and searched for food and shelter. So while she was roaming around, she happened to pass by a group of men who were drinking. These men then raped her, leaving her an emotional trauma that she would carry on her whole life. But while she would roaming around, she has a chance to seek some help from an investigator. But this investigator also raped Huli. Next, we have the rising action. Then, while Huli was roaming around, she met Tinyong. Tinyong took Huli in his house and she served as a maiden. She took care of her like he took care of his full family. Then, Huli thinks that this man is a good-hearted, but the fact is she went with him only to experience sexual exploitation again. But Huli fought back just to survive and managed to kill Tinyong in fear of her life. So basically, Huli beaten up a big stone in Tinyong's head. That's why Tinyong was died. She did it because she protected herself. Then a group of people saw the incident. They thought that Huli killed Tinyong for no reason. This issue spread throughout the town of Dimatanto. But because of this, Huli went crazy about the incident. She cannot speak, but she really knows that she just protected herself. Then after the incident, Huli was sent to mental hospital or detention cell, and that was the very last story of Huli. So that was it. It is a very short story. So let's now be proceeding to the theme of the short story, the symbolism that was used in the short story, and the message itself. So the theme of the short story. So basically, people usually make stories or rumors about the others. The community prefers fabricating stories that will suit their own taste rather than the truth. People made rumors about Huli. So a lot of things that can be brought from this story, like triumph of evil over good or the magnitude of the effects of bullying, and lot more. But the story seems to emphasize the plight of the Filipino society. As for the triumph of evil over good, it is important to think that Huli is good, but what she did was evil. So her frustrations led her to do something horrible towards someone. And the symbolism. The first one, we have the Huli's disability. So when a person cannot speak and stand for themselves, and how in these times of helplessness, the character's disability also symbolizes the poor Filipino people, criticizing and lamenting the very society where they belong, a society where the voices cannot be heard, and the result of this is very devastating, that those poor people cause destruction upon themselves. And we have Tinyong. Tinyong sometimes the ones who has the control in the society because he was introduced that he was a barangay tanod. So sometimes the ones who has the control in the society are the ones who are doing evil. And we have also the setting of the short story, which is the Dimatanto. In the Filipino language, the term Dimatanto means incomprehensible or understandable. This prose is a little self-evident, but it's really witty because it describes the people assault against Huli, as well as their lives, which can both be categorized as a messy, tattered, and unsure of where it's going. And the message of the short story, so the story focuses on the voiceless of Filipino people, as discussed previously, and how these unheard voices are constantly controlled, changed, and exploited for unknown reasons. So that would be the content of my report, and I will be ending my report in one of the famous quotation of Chez Michel. I realized that bullying never has to do with you. It's the bully who is insecure. So that will be the content of my report. Thank you guys for listening.